peace talks between Musk and Trump for today. Tesla stock down 14% yesterday, up 3.8% pre-market now. Marketplace Morning Report from APM, American Public Media.
Local IQ, a digital marketing platform, is dedicated to helping Jacksonville small business owners market themselves without the complex systems or time investment. Digital marketing tools in one place with Local IQ. More at localiq.com. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, it's the biggest stories of the week. The growing role of politics in higher ed surfaces in the scuttled bid for a new UF president. Pride illuminates downtown despite a statewide ban on rainbow bridges. A local lawmaker wants to require truck drivers to pass English proficiency exams, and Jack's city leaders send conflicting messages about local immigration enforcement. We'll talk about all that and more on our Friday Week in Review. And haiku writers are formally recognized by local authors. You can join the conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937 or emailing First Coast Connect at
In Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The Labor Department says U.S. employers created 139,000 jobs last month. That's a little more than analysts were forecasting. The May report suggests there hasn't been significant harm to the labor market from federal government layoffs or President Trump's tariffs. Shares of automaker Tesla are bouncing back this morning in pre-market trading. They dropped sharply yesterday after the public back and forth between Trump and billionaire Elon Musk. Tesla shares closed down more than 14% yesterday. As NPR's Camila Dominowski reports, Tesla's total value fell by more than $100 billion in 4 hours.
Tesla stock soared after the election as investors hoped Musk's closeness with Trump would pay off for his companies. But shares fell as they began to worry instead that Musk's work at Doge was alienating customers and distracting him from being a CEO. Now the two men have very publicly fallen out. Trump said he was disappointed in Musk. Musk accused Trump of ingratitude. Trump threatened to cancel government contracts with Musk's companies. Tesla stock saw one of its largest single-day drops in years. Camila Dominowski, NPR News.
The Trump administration says a Guatemalan man who was in the U.S. without legal status and wrongly deported has been returned. As NPR's Jimena Bustillo reports, this is a first for the Trump administration.
The man known as OCG in court records entered the country illegally last year. An immigration judge decided that he would face harm if he were sent back to Guatemala, so he was issued a protection from being deported there. But just days later, immigration officials put OCG on a bus to Mexico, and Mexico then removed him to Guatemala. A federal judge in Massachusetts ordered that OCG should not have been removed to any other country without additional legal steps, and he ordered he must be returned. The courts have also blocked third country deportations to Libya and South Sudan. The administration has been trying to send people to other countries if their home country exercises its sovereign right to refuse deportation flights. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, Washington.
The Federal Aviation Administration says it will likely suspend passenger flights near Washington, D.C. during President Trump's Army Anniversary Parade. NPR's Joel Rose has more.
Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport says the FAA will likely suspend airline operations to accommodate aircraft flyovers along the parade route and a fireworks display. The long-planned celebration to mark the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army is scheduled for the evening of June 14th, which is also President Trump's birthday. It's expected to last for 3 hours. The FAA says all arrivals and departures at Reagan Airport in Northern Virginia will be suspended during the, quote, peak of the celebration. The airport, located just a few miles from the parade route on the National Mall, was the scene of a deadly mid-air collision between a military helicopter and a passenger jet in January. Joel Rose, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. I'm Michelle Corum. A local civil rights attorney will fight today to get his 2021 lawsuit barring government funding of public tributes to the Confederacy back on track after it was dismissed in federal court. Earl Johnson Jr. argues that taxpayer-funded Confederate monuments infringe on his rights to be free from racial discrimination in public places. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals will hear arguments this morning in Jacksonville, and Johnson says he's ready to plead his case.
I'm asking the court simply not for money, not for damages, but to make a determination about my rights. What are my rights as an American citizen, as a Black American citizen? Do I have a right to walk into a park and be free of symbols of white supremacy?
Former Assistant General Counsel John Phillips, who defended the lawsuit on behalf of the city, says he still believes Johnson's claim has no merit. You can hear the entire segment on Thursday's First Coast Connect program at WJCTnews.org. Drivers can expect a repeat of last weekend's long backups on the Buckman Bridge this weekend as Florida Department of Transportation resumes its replacement of metal joints on the bridge. 2 lanes of I-295 south over the Buckman, as well as the ramp from northbound US 17 to I-295 south, will close at 10 tonight and then reopen by 4 a.m. on Monday. 40% chance of thunderstorms after 2 o'clock today, up to 91 this afternoon, and overnight a warm night, low of 75 degrees.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR be the model for high-quality journalism in the 21st century. This is NPR.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. It's Friday, which means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among our topics, a proposed presidential hire at UF dies a death of DEI after he's found too diverse for Florida's Board of Governors. LGBTQ activists and allies light up a downtown Jacksonville bridge in defiance of the governor's ban on rainbow lights. English proficiency tests could become a permanent requirement for professional truck drivers. Local immigration enforcement generates blurred lines, and conversations begin in earnest about where to begin and build a new county jail. To talk about all that and more, I am joined by Tricia Booker, author and journalism professor at the University of North Florida. Good morning, Tricia.
Good morning, Ann.
Nikesha Williams, author and producer of the Black and Published podcast. Good morning, Nikesha.
Good morning. Good morning, Duval.
Jack Webb, attorney, former city council president. Welcome back, Jack.
Thanks for having me back. Good morning.
David Bauerlein, Metro reporter at the Florida Times-Union. Good morning, David.
Good morning, everybody.
So I want to start with what was really kind of a stunning rebuke and reversal of the UF Board of Trustees. Their selection for a president to lead their school, Santa Ono, was rejected. He was slated to be just the 14th president in the school's history. Jack, first of all, just big picture, what is happening in this decision by the Board of Governors to reject the school's own Board of Trustees choice?
It really, it's just shocking and stunning what happened. It's never occurred, as David pointed out, it's never occurred in the history of the state where the Board of Governors has overturned or rebuked, just throughout a unanimous decision or any decision on the selection of a president for any of the universities within the state university system. And what's really interesting is that the decision of the Board of Trustees, I think, was unanimous, and the Board of Governors rejected it 6-10. Went back and did a little bit of research on this thing, and 13 of the members, or maybe 14 of the 17-member Board of Governors were appointed on or after 2018, which is the year that Governor DeSantis took over as governor. So this clearly is it's a political move. Again, another reach by the governor's office to correct a decision that he didn't particularly care for or agree with. But that said, the Board of Trustees is not some hyper liberal left wing group either, and there was some some dissatisfaction and disappointment. Maury Husseini, I think, basically just called out the Board of Governors. But all you did here was take a guy down. The guy was, Dr. Ono was subjected to cross-examination without probably having been provided any prior notice.
Yeah.
So it's an embarrassment, and this insidious culture war, power struggle that's going on in the state is starting to have tangible negative effect. I'm a UF grad. I got my master's degree there. I went to law school there, and I'm gravely concerned for the stability of the university going forward. Who's going to apply for this job, right? I mean, is it Paul Renner that really wants the job? Is that what's going on here? I know Maury Husseini kind of raised the issue at the Board of Governors.
And we should say Paul Renner, former lawmaker from St. Johns County, sits on the Board of Governors. And according to a member, to Husseini, as you said, a member of the Board of Trustees who had supported Ono's seat as a president of the university, said that Renner had applied for the job, which Renner didn't exactly deny. Nikesha, I want to ask you, I mean, Santa Ono had been the president of the University of Michigan, a job that he has, resigned. But he previously was the University of British Columbia president. He was the president of the University of Cincinnati. He had educational bona fides, but he also had spent the last several months trying to kind of correct his reputation on issues of perhaps being a little more DEI friendly than Florida likes currently, the leadership likes, or being not sympathetic enough to Israelis or too pro-Palestinian. And so he had actually, done some deliberate course correction, people say, to sort of, be conservative enough for Florida and Florida's leadership, and didn't quite make that mark.
I think that's just indicative of how much we're living in the upside down. For someone who is on paper completely reputable, multi-degreed, and experienced for this position, having led other prestigious universities, to be turned down by the Board of Governors because he was too much of a DEI candidate in a state that abhors diversity, equity, and inclusion, only goes to show that the only person who's going to be actually qualified to take this job, according to the Board of Governors, is a cishet white man who might have racist leanings. Let's just call it what it is. So we're not hiding anymore that we want someone who can believe that Israel should be able to live, Israeli students should be able to have a peaceful academic experience, the Israeli people in Israel should be able to have a peaceful life, and that Palestine should be free. We're not going to have the opportunity to say that there should be a two-state solution to the Middle East crisis, and that settler colonialism is wrong. We don't hold the belief that two things can be true at once, that the right and the freedom to protest and to petition the government should allow safety for Israeli students, as well as outrage of pro-Palestinian students and
how did
protesters
international
as well.
issues become so core to the debate over a leader of a university in Florida?
Because international issues, like national issues, become debate of the leader of Florida when the leader of Florida wants to be on the national and international stage and wants to become the next leader of the free world, right? So everything that has happened in the state of Florida since 2020 and the COVID pandemic, which was a global crisis, has come down to Ron DeSantis positioning himself in a way that would make him heir apparent to Donald Trump and the next presidential contender. While his 2024 bid did not work out, he still has those ambitions.
Well, to Jack's point, Tricia, I mean, who is going to want to apply for this job, just given sort of the ideological bent of this search and the rejection of Santa Ono as president?
Well, the only person who's going to apply for the job is somebody who knows he's going to get it. I mean, I think that's where we're going. I think the international stage is somewhat of a red herring so that we don't have to talk about DEI. And I think this is indicative of the continual redefining of what DEI actually is. And there's this false narrative that we get a bunch of diverse people from any background at all, and then we throw spaghetti at the wall and pick one, and that's what DEI is. And of course, that is absolutely not what it is. I was struck last weekend. I was at my 40th college reunion, aging myself. I went to the University of Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is a little bit shielded from a lot of this because they're a Catholic university, and so they're seen as conservative. Prestigious university, although I wouldn't be able to get in there now, but $20 billion endowment, okay? They've got diversity initiatives all over the place, and they are not afraid of it. Now, they're not waving the red cape at the bull, but they've got they're celebrating Black History Month. During Black History Month, the women's basketball team wore T-shirts that had "Lift Every Voice" written on the back seat, the back of it, the lyrics, because they sang it before every game. So, to me, it's like
We should say that that's known as the Black National
yes,
Anthem.
the Black National Anthem. And I thought, this is what diversity initiatives are about. It's not about hiring people who are unqualified. It's about opportunity for people who are qualified but might not get the chance. And that really struck me when I was reading what the articles about the UF president, is that this continual redefining of what DEI actually is really harming. Is harming our democracy, but also harming the people who could be qualified to hold these positions.
So, David, I'm just curious. I mean, this comes after a series of, new appointments at colleges around the state, colleges and universities in the state system, a number of new leaders, 5 or 6, I think, kind of closely aligned with the governor. And we know that the previous leader of UF, Ben Sass, left sort of in, a cloud of questions, if not disgrace, because of really excessive spending, and, concerns about the direction that the school was going. So, I mean, what's happening big picture to the reputation of Florida schools? I mean, they are still very highly ranked. UF is considered one of the best schools in the country.
Well, I think the reason that there was this push by the University of Florida Board of Trustees to bring in Santaono is he was viewed as somebody who really knew how to grow, develop, improve the research capability of a university, which University of Michigan has a lot of great research programs, arguably more than University of Florida does. And so the idea that he would come down, kind of bring that same kind of leadership, that was viewed as something really good for the University of Florida and the schools and the college system here in Florida. So the flip side is, well, hire somebody who is already within Florida government circles, which we've seen happen over and over again, who has never worked in the academic world, but may have the other sort of some credentials to be able to raise money, to work with the legislature. Those are important.
Like what happened at FAMU.
But it's never actually, right, a good example too. It was never
The college.
actually done that, knows how to grow the fundamental bread and butter core stuff the university does. And so, to the extent that it's kind of like the old saying, where someone does something wrong and they go, "This will go on your permanent record." Well, this is going to be on the permanent record of anybody who ever said anything about DEI or how to grow diversify a student body, all this kind of stuff. And it's going to be viewed as, based on what happened here, as disqualifying, no matter what you can bring to every other aspect of growing a university's potential for doing research, educating students, attracting talent to the state.
And by the way, those researchers, many of them are fleeing Florida because
Absolutely.
we've essentially decimated tenure here.
Fleeing
And if
Florida
you are-
and fleeing the country.
Right. Yeah, and they're taking their money with them. I mean, if you have been awarded a research grant and you leave the university, that money follows you, not the university. So there definitely are going to be long-term impacts.
And federal research grants have been canceled across universities and at the highest levels of government at the National Institutes of Health. So we are about to have a brain drain because of the policies federally and statewide.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, you were saying that this is, the first time this kind of rejection has happened. But I mean, in fact, it comes after the Board of Governors kind of gave itself this new authority, recently to ding a choice if they so chose, and to kind of be more of a part of those decisions made by the Board of Trustees, which are, more kind of, those are associated with the school as opposed to statewide board making these decisions.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Where did this come from? I went back and I looked at the statutory provisions with regards to the Board of Trustees on the local level, university level, and then I looked at the constitutional background of creation of the Board of Governors, which replaced the Board of Regents that was abolished by Jeb Bush, and then Bob Graham initiated a constitutional referendum that created the Board of Governors. But they have distinct but similar roles, but there's no constitutional provision for veto power over the Board of Trustees. Not to say that they don't have the authority to do it, but just by virtue of their existence. But as you say, it's just unheard of. And if you're a local board member, it's like, well, what just happened here? What just happened here? I did all this work. And quite honestly, I was shocked at the selection. After the debacle that was Ben Sass, with all the consulting contracts and the tripling of the budget and all of that other happy nonsense, I was like, whoa, they really got their act together here. And apparently it didn't bode well with the governor's office, because somebody made the phone call and kind of like you said before, it's like, well, we're going to pull an FAMU here, right?
Yeah.
We want our person. So we don't know who our person is yet, but it ain't this guy.
I mean, it's FAMU, as you said, but also Florida International, where Jeanette Nunez is going to be the new president. Manny Diaz at the University of West Florida. Richard Corcoran, as you say, at New College.
Yep.
Ben Sass, Adam Hassner at FAU. So, I mean, there really is this very strong political footprint at all of these state colleges. And not to mention that, the appointments that are happening to the Board of Trustees and the Board of Governors, all largely controlled by this governor.
We are seeing a consolidation of power in education under the belief that if you can, and I'm going to use their word, indoctrinate students at a level where they are just beginning to form their opinions about state, local, national, and global affairs, and get them into a thinking where all of their ideas are now filtered through this lens of conservatism, whether you call it that or not, and they see diversity as a problem. They see equity as harmful. They see inclusion as erasure. And you allow that to flourish over the course of 4 years, and then they take that thinking into the workplace and into their families and into their livelihoods. Then you are going to grow a set of young people who will be future leaders of America in whatever industry that they choose to go in, that will then have this indoctrination and filter everything through that conservative lens and roll back 50, 60, 70, 80, hundreds of years of progress for every other type of person in the United States who has benefited from civil rights and freedom movements. That is the intention here. Florida is the breeding ground for that, as we saw what started with New College last year, which was a liberal college that was a bastion and a safe place for the LGBTQ community, especially their young children who were always at risk of harm and bullying and sometimes suicide and self-harm. So if we can make New College a conservative think tank and do the same thing at FAMU, a historically Black university that prides itself on growing Black people and instilling them with pride, young Black leaders, and instilling them with pride of going to the 7 highest hills and all of those things, and put a leader in there that has a conservative bent, and then push those students out into the world, then there will be no need for diversity, equity, and inclusion, because now everyone will see everything as reverse racism or, oh, I don't see color, when we have very real issues of color and race and ethnicity that have never been solved in this country because we want to move past that instead of dealing with the issue. That is what's happening in Florida. And if you can do that in a state and push that forward just by students here, who's to say that that won't happen nationally, which we're seeing with all the other fights at universities across the country?
Tricia, are you seeing that on campus? I mean, you're kind of closest to that world out of all of us.
I'm certainly seeing it among faculty being afraid to speak their minds, especially young faculty who are trying to establish their careers. They're afraid. They are changing the way they teach. We are now subject to all of our syllabi and coursework and course requirements being sent to the state for review. Certainly, it's making you think twice about the way that you teach. Especially, again, like I said, tenure is pretty much gone. I mean, you're reviewed every 5 years. That's really not tenure. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that we are not seeing it as much on a level as you're seeing at UF or some of these universities that have more protests and have more outspoken activities. But yeah, we're seeing it definitely in the way we project our classes and the way that we are allowed, or supposed to be allowed, I should say, to impart knowledge to students.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Tricia Booker, David Bauerlein, Nikesha Williams, and Jack Webb. We're talking about the week's big headlines, and if you have thoughts that you'd like to share, you can give us a call, 904-549-2937. You can also email comments or questions to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or X at FCC On Air. I do want to move on and talk about this bridge lighting that occurred this week, part of a pride celebration in downtown Jacksonville. And David, I'm going to start with you because this is really part of an ongoing saga that's been, manifesting in a variety of different ways, is starting in 2021. Can you kind of remind us of the evolution of like why bridge lighting became a thing relevant to pride celebrations?
Well, sure. So in the Jacksonville Transportation Authority, local authority, paid for and installed lights on the Acosta Bridge. It could be programmed to change colors, and it was for all sorts of different events, commemorations, Jaguars home games, Jumbo Shrimp homestands, health awareness months, holidays. So one of the ones that was done in 2021, 2022, and 2023 was rainbow colors for Pride Month. And so in 2021, the state briefly told them to turn them off, and they got them back on. In 22 and 23, they stayed on. And then in 2024, the state came up with a new policy that for the entire summer for state-owned bridges, and the Acosta Bridge is owned by the state, there would be just red, white, and blue for, quote, Freedom Summer. And then this year, they came back and said they're going to be red, white, and blue through next year to celebrate the oncoming 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So that means no other lighting displays. And so that meant that for the second year in a row, no Pride Month displays. It also means that there's going to be no Juneteenth lighting display for the second year in a row. And so what happens then is the LGBTQ community and its allies then said last year and again this year, if you're not going to light the bridge, we're going to do it. So they go out with this sort of handheld flashlights. They did it last year on the Main Street Bridge, this year on the Acosta Bridge, and just basically light up the bridge and say, this is our statement that we think this is important. We're here, we're celebrating. And so it's sort of a protest, sort of celebration. Looks like if they want to light the bridge next year, it's probably going to have to be the same method, because next year they'll still be in a red, white, and blue format. So it's kind of this ongoing battle in terms of how to commemorate and mark Pride Month, which, if it was just up to local authorities, would be happening, but the State Department of Transportation owns the bridge.
Nikesha.
Can you explain about how they were on the main street? Can you talk about that, Jack?
And they raised
I was going to ask David about that. Yeah.
Right. This is kind of this is what we're still trying to understand what happened. So they were going to go marching over to the Main Street Bridge. They're about to go into the middle section, which is where they would line up with their flashlights, and then the bridge middle span goes up, so they can't go any further.
And there are no boats out there, right?
And so, so it's like, well, why did it go up at that point in time? Because they originally were going to do it later in the evening and night. The state, though, was doing some planned maintenance of the bridge, so the bridge was supposed to be closed at 9 o'clock. Well, they go marching to the bridge at 8 o'clock. The bridge man goes up. They're like, well, now we can't go any further. So then they march over to the Acosta Bridge and they do the lights there. So they still are able to do their lighting display. But the question that the State Department of Transportation is yet to answer is, why did that lift span go up at that time?
I should add to that. I mean, there was a report on one of the TV stations, I think it was Action News, that did finally get a comment from DOT that said that was part of a nightly maintenance, not a drill, but it was part of the maintenance that they've been doing, that they have to get crews in place, and they have to do that before the actual maintenance begins. And the spokesperson for DOT said that bridge was raised to get the crews up to the level where they had to do their scheduled maintenance, and that was something that happened not only on that Monday night or whatever it was, but it happened on the nights preceding and thereafter. And so the fact that it was raised when there was no boat passing underneath was part of this scheduled maintenance that they were doing. But I should say that, that answer, I think the question more than the answer, I think, points to this lack of trust, if nothing else.
They can give whatever answer they want. Like, how hateful do you have to be to take any little joys that a group of people who have found community and family and chosen kinship away from them? and say that, you know what, we don't want you to take joy when you drive at night and see the bridge lit up in the rainbow colors or in the red, black, and green of the Pan-African flag for Black History Month and Juneteenth, or whatever other colors they choose to light up to honor whatever marginalized and systematically disenfranchised groups that they want. Like, how much contempt do you have to have for a group of people that you may not understand or agree with or align with, or you think is so DEI that you say, you know what, we're going to raise the bridge and we're going to call it maintenance, and we're not going to allow you to these lights that we paid for that can be programmed into any color, we're only going to use red, white, and blue, as if we don't know that we live in the United States of America and that, freedom is what we claim, even though no one really sees it unless you are of a certain background, and that we're going to celebrate the Declaration of Independence a year early and all through its 250th anniversary, even though the Declaration of Independence didn't free everybody and was not independent for everyone. Sure, how much contempt do you have to have? It's comical. We are so unserious.
I will say, the one word comes to mind with this is just petty. Just very petty. But it begs the question, Ann. We got a response. All right, so it begs the question: routine maintenance. Well, first, my understanding is that the bridge was scheduled to be closed at 9:00. They raised it at 8:00 for the routine maintenance to get their people up there. All right, so that begs the question: the day before, did they do the routine maintenance? What time did they raise the bridge? Was it at 8:00 or was it at 9:00? All right, next day, and David's taking notes here, but the next day when they did the routine maintenance, did they schedule it at 9:00 and close it at 8, or did they just raise it at 9:00 pursuant to the schedule? That's my question.
It's all as the mother, the proud mother, the very proud and fearful mother of a gay son. It's petty and it's just mean, and the goal is to tamp down any kind of power, incremental power that this group has to represent themselves. It just makes me really afraid.
The intent is to dehumanize people. The intent is to strip them of whatever dignity that they may have, whatever pockets of joy that they may find, whatever little minute celebration that they might have by saying, you know what, the state is doing this to us, so we're going to take matters into our own hands. That is the point of these power trips. And the fact that people continue to rise up against them and continue to resist and rebel against what the state is trying to do to them and try to strip them of their humanity and their dignity should be applauded, because this is what resistance looked like, and this is how freedom is fought and won for all people.
And perhaps that's what we need to focus on, is that, I'm sorry for interrupting, David, but the fact that they, whatever happened on the Main Street Bridge, regardless, that they adapted and they went to the Acosta Bridge and they did this amazing thing.
Yeah, it's an admirable show of sort of civil
resilience.
Yeah. And I will say this too: while the state has ordered effectively that there are not any pride colors on the bridge this month, or colors for the Juneteenth celebration, as there have been in the past. Basically, when you were downtown, the CSX building, Fortune 500 headquarters building, had the pride lights on its building. If you went a little bit further down towards the football stadium, where they have the it's sort of the big building for the Daly's Place Amphitheater, and it's got the big lighting display that was lit up in pride lights. So again, I think it's just kind of a weird situation where, in terms of the local politics and social scene, there would be pride lights on the bridge. It's just you have the state telling them you can't do it. And so it's one of those state-city
It is a weird evolution, because there was just even a few years ago when the bridge was lit up and all these downtown buildings were also showing that same support by lighting up in rainbow colors. And we should say, I mean, we did get a message from Tom on Facebook. He says the bridge lighting event was brilliant. Congrats and thanks to all of the participants at both bridges. The people who did participate and who, then were there to witness it and take a lot of pictures of this really beautiful bridge lighting, I think feel a lot of power from the fact that that display went off and looked, kind of as amazing as it did. Absolutely. Despite the fact that the state will no longer do that display, and despite the fact that their initial attempt to do it was displaced, and they had to, I think one gentleman said literally had to walk a mile to kind of carry out this additional display. So it is a moment that I think some people are celebrating with a lot of pride, even though it was derailed in some ways. I do want to move on to a topic, kind of a triumvirate of topics here around the subject of immigration, starting with this requirement for English-speaking truck drivers. This is something that's coming out of St. Johns County. Nikesha, it's called Connor's Law, and it basically is based in the death of an 18-year-old high school student from I think Creekside.
Yes, I was reading up about this, and so what happened was, I guess the person who was behind the truck, didn't behind the wheel of the truck, was not proficient in English and could not understand the street signs and the traffic lights and everything that was happening when this teenager was killed. And so that was the impetus for the law that any driver who is behind these commercial rigs would have to be proficient in English. That requirement had been stripped when there was a trucking shortage. How convenient, and now it's been put back. Now that that this tragedy has happened, and so this is again in Florida showing that it's regulation and oversight of certain industries is flexible depending on what's happening in the economy or what the needs are at the time.
Mm. Tricia, I don't know what weight the county commission necessarily carries in this national effort, but this was, being supported by a county commissioner there, Christian Whitehurst, who says that he hopes that the county commissioner's support will kind of help fast track it. This, again, would require people who want a CDL to pass this specific proficiency test, and it follows on an executive order signed by the president, kind of reinforcing, I think, goals and priorities when it comes to sort of who's in this country and who's, eligible for the rights of citizens.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with the accident at all. I mean, there's no evidence that his inability to read English had anything to do with what happened. He had been driving for 25 hours straight. He was going 70 miles an hour on cruise control. I mean, you don't need to speak English to say, wow, cars are coming up fast. Clearly, this was a bad driving thing and had very little to do with his ability to speak English. I think they are using his death, and which was tragic, a terrible, terrible tragedy for his family, but they are using that as a way to further their hard stance on immigration. To me, the two things are completely unrelated.
Maybe related, though, just to the immigration conversations that we're having, that are happening elsewhere, David, including this story that you reported on this week about the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and their willingness or plan to enforce our local immigration law at the city level. Can you explain what's happening? Because there was a little bit of a change in their stance.
Right. The Office of General Counsel, which is the city's attorney's kind of in-house law firm, basically advised the sheriff's office, don't enforce the local immigration law while a similar state law is being challenged in court and there's an injunction against it, saying, our law is modeled after the state law, so just hold off on enforcing our law. And originally, the response that I got from the sheriff's office on Monday was that it is following the advice of the attorneys in terms of that. So basically, they're pausing enforcement until that's all kind of sorted out with the state law. Then the sheriff's office said later in the week, no, they are not following the advice, and it's just advice, and they would be enforcing the local law. Now, they have not made any arrests yet under the local law. So it's kind of this back and forth. It's kind of this confusing area in terms of this whole law, because Jacksonville's the only city in the country that has enacted this kind of a law. There's 150 years of court cases that say the federal government has sole power to set immigration law, and the states can't do it. The local government certainly can't do it. So, but there's all this back and forth then about whether even advising the sheriffs to not enforce the law while there's a court case going, siding with open border politics, as City Council member Kevin Carrico, who sponsored the law, says. So it's all wrapped up in this whole sort of very confusing in some ways, uncertain in other ways, a deal where this city is really trying to put its own stamp on enforcing immigration law.
Can I ask you a question, though? I mean, we should be clear. First of all, the Office of General Counsel told JSO that they should continue enforcing federal law, which is, kind of supersedes all others. And the question was really about the state law, which is the subject of this injunction. Federal court has told the state not to enforce it, and the city law, very similar to the state law, would appear to fall under that umbrella, at least according to the city attorney. But I'm curious if you're able to share a little bit more about how you learned of that reversal or change, because you said that you heard from the sheriff's office, I think in an email Monday, that they were going to heed the city attorney, and then later told that they were not going to, and they were going to enforce state and local law. Can you tell us how you learned about that?
Yeah, well, basically, to be completely transparent, I mean, the story went up on our website, and then it was also picked up by our First Coast News partner, and they did the website, put it on their website, and I think they had some outreach from the sheriff's office saying, that's not what our position is, and so then First Coast News shared me what they got, and then I followed up and talked to the sheriff's office to find out what their position is. So the at least in terms of finding out about what their position is and whether there was a change in position or not, that didn't happen until after the story was posted, and so that's the best I can explain it. And in terms of how that kind of went down.
Jack, I'm curious, I mean, as a lawyer, as a former city council member, just kind of your interpretation of what's happening there.
Well, apparently JSO needs a lawyer to interpret the legal advice they get from the city lawyers, but I'm willing to step into the breach here. But that said, this whole thing is just mind-boggling to me, in that, again, Carrico in his comments said, we are not going to abide by the advice of the mayor's lawyer. They're tying our hands, whatever. That said, the email, it wasn't even a full-blown opinion. It was just an email from Sean Granite at the request to Carrico.
Sean Granite works in the office of general counsel. He's an attorney.
Exactly. And quite honestly, I know Sean, and his client is not the mayor. His client is JSO. And having looked at what he wrote, I think it was very reasonable and very well thought out. And basically, I look at it as a lawyer's perspective as, an issue in implicating qualified immunity. All right. This judge has said, this state law, there's a TRO, halting enforcement of the state law, a temporary restraining order, that she has deemed to be operative statewide because of constitutional implications or issues raised in the state statute. So you got a local statute that mirrors that state statute, and the general counsel's office has opined that there's a high likelihood that if this were challenged, there would be a similar finding by a court of competent jurisdiction with regards to the enforceability of this issue. So you want to go ahead and enforce it, that's fine, but are you on notice of or have you been provided some sort of notice that it may in fact be illegal? So you want to wind up getting sued and stripped of qualified immunity under a Section 1983 case, civil rights action? Have at it. But
well, what makes sense about disregarding your attorney's advice when it comes to this issue?
I can't think of one. I mean, I don't know. I mean, as everyone has said, go ahead and enforce the federal law. And to your point, Ann, that the federal law pretty much supersedes. I mean, there's no preemption argument here, or actually there probably is a preemption argument here. But bottom line is, I see no harm to anybody by putting your guns back in your holsters, boys and girls, and let's figure out what the legal landscape is, and let's move on. Stop playing politics.
I mean, is it kind of like, it feels like noise to me. Like we want to say to people, you're not just illegal, excuse me, you're double illegal, you're state illegal, and you're city illegal. It just, I don't understand the point.
Well, there is, in addition, this proposed immigration ordinance that Councilmember Rory Diamond now has submitted that would require the mayor to submit a detailed report by the end of June to the Finance Committee. And basically, he wants to see all federal grants and the existing and diversity DEI policies for employment with the city. He's also asking, Nikesha, for the number of undocumented residents living in public housing. And the stated goal there is to make sure that people who do not have documentation are not recipients of city dollars.
that can be the stated goal, but that's not what it is. Like, we've been seeing the city council and the city council president going back and forth with this mayor in a tit for tat since he came into power. This is about power, and the city council, with its Republican leaning and its majority, is trying to show that they are the true stakeholders and power shakers in this country that have the ability to do whatever they want, despite who sits in the mayor's office. That's what this is, and so, you know, seeing where federal dollars are going and who's having access to them, we have a housing crisis, period. Not just for the undocumented, not just for those making a certain amount of money. There is a housing crisis, period. So if you're going to examine federal dollars and public housing and all of these different things, why don't you do that for the good of everyone that lives in the city of Duval County instead of singling out the people that you want to ban? There is no such thing as an illegal person, period. But we keep banning people on the grounds of they don't fit the makeup of what you want in your bold new city of the South. You know, their homeless people can't be here, undocumented people can't be here, and you're trying to flex your power about what monies we get, what the mayor is doing, who's being helped. Why don't you just come out and say who you don't want to be helped? Because that would be a whole lot easier than trying to parse through this legalese.
Well, one thing that's interesting is, I mean, if this law is enforced by JSO, the city immigration law, it probably would boost the population of the jail, which does receive city money and presumably would end up costing a little bit more. But I do want to talk about the jail, David, because that's something else that,
Right?
Thanks so much.
They need bodies to build it, right?
You've been talking about, where this jail might be located, and that is a conversation that is going to be insanely heated when it really gets underway, but it's starting to percolate.
It is. So basically, for a long time, the sort of placeholder location has been up on the north side. There's already a Montgomery Congressional Center up there. It's off Lanny Road. The city owns a few hundred acres. So that's one possible site. And there was a consultant who put in an unsolicited proposal that said, from what we know now, that'd probably be a good place to build it, but added, that would take further review. So now that's the next step the city's going to do is they're going to bring in somebody who's going to hire a consultant who's going to really show how to go through the process of deciding where to build this jail. And remember, one reason why they're not doing it, they don't want to move it out of downtown, is people in downtown don't want a jail in downtown anymore. So it's kind of like, well, if you don't want it downtown, I probably don't want it in my neck of the woods either. Mm-hmm. And so that could be really controversial. We know in the past there's been opposition to, many years ago, there was a plan to build possibly a state prison on the west side. That got a huge amount of pushback. It got killed. There's been this ongoing protest about the decision by the city to build, put the medical examiner's offices with the morgue in the Brentwood neighborhood, where people didn't know about it till it was too late to do anything about it. So there's a lot of people who connected with that who are saying, we're fearful the same thing's going to happen with the jail. It's just going to be decided. And then after the fact, we get to react to it. So it'd be interesting to see what the process is, if there's going to be a number of sites that are going to put out there in public, or if it's going to be kind of all done sort of behind the scenes, and then here's our decision, and then this is the way it's going to be type of approach.
Do you care to forecast, Jack?
I don't know. I think it's interesting. The unsolicited proposal came back. The city rejected it. We're going to go to RFP. That is a full-blown request for proposals. And I think, to David's point, they're going to look at a bunch of different sites, because you're going to get a lot of NIMBY stuff going on here.
Well, didn't the sheriff say, I'm not necessarily interested in the Lanny Road site on the north side? That's too far. I mean, isn't that kind of like his first take?
Well, there is an issue. There's a logistical challenge, because you're going to have to provide for transport or availability access to courts. There's no constitutional, well, I don't know. I did a little bit of research this morning before coming in. I can't find any specific constitutional provisions under the Florida Constitution that would require immediate the jail adjacency to the courts, but that's what we currently have. But in any event, you're going to have some sort of pre-trial or pre-hearing processing place close to the courthouse. So that is one consideration. But having represented Lydia Bell in the Brentwood Community Association in various matters,
that's the group that kind of opposes the morgue.
Yeah, and that was the whole liquor store issue. Recall that. Mm-hmm. I will guarantee that this jail is not going in Brentwood. Okay.
So the RFP is not for building it. The RFP is just for firms to examine what would be best.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And again, there are going to be a number of different proposals. I think there was a P3 public-private partnership type proposal where you bring in private dollars in a kind of a leaseback type deal. I think that's on the table as well. That way you take it off the balance sheet, the city's balance sheet.
Well, it is an issue that we will no doubt follow because the
Yeah.
jail is not coming soon and it's not going away soon as a topic. So thanks so much for talking about it this morning. Jack Webb, David Bauerlein, Tricia Booker, Nikesha Williams. Thank you so much for being on today. Really appreciate you guys.
Good job.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, haiku poet is formally recognized by local authors. I hope you can tell what I just did there.
Congaree & Pen, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpen.com. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Highway, hospital, home, work. Where injuries happen can make a difference in the law and the outcome.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
I'm David McGowan, CEO of WJCT Public Media. You've heard me during pledge drives talking about how your support powers everything we do. But today, I want to talk about another piece of our funding, federal support. Each year, public media receives about $1.60 per American from the federal government. Most of that goes to local stations like WJCT. And with it, we raise $7 for every one we receive. It's a smart, efficient partnership that's worked since 1967 with bipartisan support. But that funding is now at risk. If you value the trusted news, music, and educational services you get from WJCT, we need your voice. Visit wjct.org/protect to tell your representatives to preserve federal funding for public media. It's quick, it makes a difference, and it will keep WJCT strong. That's wjct.org/protect. Thank you.
President Trump tells travelers from 12 countries to stay out of the U.S. and moves to keep Harvard's international students out too. Meanwhile, a test for Senate Republicans as they take sides on that big bill. Plus, what new tariffs on steel and aluminum could mean for the price of cars and beyond. Join us for the Friday News Roundup as we wrap up the biggest stories of the week. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, the 5/7/5 rhythm of haiku has been around for hundreds of years, but the art form continues to compel modern writers, including here locally. Here to tell us about the Authors Roundtable of Florida's Haiku Poetry Contest is Roundtable President Regina Edwards. Good morning, Regina.
Good morning.
We're also joined by Brandon Dwyer. He is the first place winner of this year's contest. Good morning, Brandon.
Good morning. So
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I wonder, so you're the first place winner. Can we just start off by hearing your haiku?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Even though it's short, I do have to read it.
Okay.
It was not until I gave of myself with love was joy free to roam.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful poem. And so I'm going to ask you a really basic question.
Yeah.
Like, how long did it take you to write?
So it actually didn't take too long. I saw the contest and I got very excited.
Mhm.
I love trying new things. And yeah, I think I wrote it within 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Short and sweet. Are you a poet by training, by nature?
I write little poetry in my Instagram
Uh-huh.
with my posts, just thoughtful considerations of my life and my existence and my perception of it.
Yeah. And Regina, how did the idea for a haiku poetry contest arise?
Actually, it arrived from one of our very own members,
Mm.
Kat, who you're probably familiar with here at
Yes.
WJCT.
A lot of people who come to WJCT will know Catwoman. She
Yes.
is at the front desk very often when people arrive here, and kind of the face of the station in a lot of ways.
Yes, she's been around with the Authors Roundtable for about 9 years, because that's as long as we've been in existence. And she had this great idea about a haiku contest for Poetry Month. And I was like, sure, it's your idea, take it away. And so we started asking for our different writers to submit, and we had so many people submit, and it was fun. It was fun reading all of the different poetry. It was short. You could tell everybody who participated, they did it with joy. You could hear it in the poetry.
Yeah. I think of them as sort of, I mean, this is maybe not the right way to teach it, but it's sort of like almost like a poem and a limerick together, right? It's kind of got like, some of them are quite amusing. You know, they've got sort of a funny sensibility, even when they're serious, because they're just, the form is so constricted. Were they enjoyable, though, to read?
They really were. It was interesting that people actually followed the instructions, because that was part of winning. You had to follow the instructions.
Like
Well, I'm
what?
grateful for that.
I mean, other than the form, what other instruction?
The instruction, Brendan, share. Help
I'm fairly
me.
certain it was
It's
just the
fi-
instructions of the 17 syllables, 5, 7, 5, or
Yes,
yeah.
575.
In terms of collecting or putting your thoughts together.
So
like
any
that.
topic, it was wide open.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You kind of play with whatever is in your soul in that moment.
And so the Authors Roundtable, I mean, it's a nonprofit. It's been around, as you said, for about 9 years now.
Yes.
What is the goal of it?
The goal of the Authors Roundtable is to support local authors in whatever way that they need as a writer. Many writers come to the writing industry thinking one thing, because they're creatives and they're writing and they're so into their writing, but they don't realize after they get through putting all this time and energy into this book, it doesn't sell itself. And so we start at the very beginning of the process, helping them get their writing style down, helping them get the words on paper. A lot of times it's just an idea. And so we help them through their process, and we help them complete the process. If you get writer's block, we help you get unstuck. If you are stuck on illustrations, we help you find an illustrator. It's a supportive community.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of serious authors. It's a really eclectic group of writers and creators. We have beginners, and we have people who have been writing for many years that are retired professionals.
Yeah.
So we have a really wide range.
I imagine, you know, there's so many different kinds of books, right? There's mystery writers, there's nonfiction writers, there's history writers, there's, you know, all kinds, and poetry writers.
Yeah.
Is that your primary interest?
So I was a fashion designer for 17 years, and I'm now branching out into just seeing where my creativity can land. I've kind of went into a new career working with autistic youth, and yeah, writing is definitely on my spectrum and something that I enjoy doing. But I have a book in mind that is more nonfiction, not quite poetry. But
Excellent. Just briefly, Regina, if people are interested in knowing more or participating, how can they?
If people are interested, they can find us at www.authorsroundtable.org.
Okay.
We meet at the Writers Lab every first Saturday down at the main library, Jacksonville Public Library, the main branch. Every first Saturday, the lower level, 10:15 to noon, the writer community come together. We have speakers and we share.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave it there. Regina Edwards, Brandon Dwyer, again, congratulations. Thanks so much for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
it's an honor.
All right. And thank you for listening. If you have comments or questions, please send them to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. Join us Monday when we discuss the effort.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or BaptistJax.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com.
On the next Electro Lounge, we've got covers of your favorite songs, and then we're off for a night out at the Planetarium. Join us Saturday night at 9 for the Electro Lounge, only on WJCT News 89.9.